Feminism nowadays has gone a little bit bonkers, and this has given rise to this incredibly virulent and increasingly popular anti-feminist movement. And it's not unfounded. Although it is grounded somewhat in reality, it's given, I think it's gone too far. The anti-feminist movement has created a home for legitimate sexists and legitimate misogynists to have a place where they can thrive. And we're... Alright everyone, welcome back to my channel. So what I wanted to talk about today was feminism, because this is a subject that everybody gets frustrated about. People get up in arms over. It's become very controversial on both sides of the aisle, and I apologize if you can hear a cat crying in the background. She wants out, and she cannot leave. So basically what I wanted to talk about today was how there's two sides to feminism. So feminism as it stands today is very different than what it was 100 years ago, or maybe more like 80 years ago. When the layman hears about feminism, they think about, oh, you know, women's right to vote, women, you know, in the workplace, all that kind of stuff. And that's all well and good. Like, I'm down with all of that. I'm down with women voting. I know I've joked, Ann Coulter has this joke about how if women weren't voting, then the country would be more conservative. And I think that that's kind of a lazy answer to that issue. If it's not their fault that you haven't been able to convince people of your arguments. That's just to say, oh, you know, we should just ban people from voting Democrat. No, that would not be the democratic process, really. You know, you need to convince people that your ideas are correct, and you need to do a better job of it than the Democrats are doing it. You can't just whine and complain, well, it's too bad that women are voting. That's like saying it's too bad that blacks are voting. No, that's not acceptable. You have to make your case for your argument, and if you're not making that case, then that's on you. That's not on the people that are failing to vote for you. So that was a rabbit trail. I'm all down with women voting. I am certainly all down with women in the workplace and women having high-level positions in the workplace and so on and so forth. I feel like that should be a given. That should be a given with everybody. What has unfortunately happened nowadays is you've got feminism has been perverted and extended to things like women's right to abortion, basically a woman's right to kill somebody based on their location. So if their location, it happens to be in the womb, then it's completely fine. If the location happens to be, oh, it was 5 minutes after birth, and oh, we intended for this to be an abortion, but the abortion was botched, and you know, the child lived, we can still kill that. That's now considered feminism. No, that's not feminism. But I digress. There's so many things now that modern feminism has been expanded to encompass. You've got, you know, basically, and there's a movement for women to run around topless all the time, which I'm sure a lot of men are actually down with. And that does, you know, for all the women being worried about objectification that are in favor of that movement, it just seems like it's a little bit counterproductive. Just saying. So you've got the different movements and the different you know, gender rights activists now being involved in feminism. Feminism has even come to encompass men who cross-dress and men who want you to believe that they are women, even though they still have all of their male anatomy. There's this thing, this term being thrown around called the female penis, which that's news to me. I've never seen one of those that's a female, but yeah, it's... Feminism nowadays has gone a little bit bonkers, and this has given rise to this incredibly virulent and increasingly popular anti-feminist movement, and it's not unfounded. My first point of this video is to explain why the anti-feminist movement has a basis in reality to a certain extent, because the modern feminist movement has become anti-science, has become anti-male, has become just pretty much a catch-all for any crazy gender politic that you want to throw in there. You know, if it has to do even remotely with women, or if it has the word women in it, so like transgender woman, even though that is technically a biological male, now all of a sudden that's a feminist rights issue. That's a little, it's a little weird. I understand why so many people are like, this is crazy, this is wrong, this is insane, what are you talking about? How could you possibly think that this is okay to encompass? Now we have to give you the right to kill your unborn child, we have to give you the right to be called the pronouns of your choice, or be jailed, or be fined, or whatever it happens to be. In California, you can be fined for failing to use the appropriate gender. So I understand. The modern feminist movement is crazy. They call it third wave feminism because I guess the first wave was the women's right to vote, the second wave was women's ability to move into the workforce, and yada, yada, yada. Now they call it third wave feminism to talk about these crazy social justice additions to the feminist movement. So I'm on board with that. I'm down with that. I'm anti those things. I'm anti killing people. I'm anti this kind of these restrictions on language to say that you can only refer to somebody in a certain way, and if they're offended, then you can be fined. Those kinds of things. I'm not down with that. I'm down with people leaving me alone and leaving everybody else alone, including the child that you helped to create, and you don't get to kill that. I'm sorry. That's just not how this works. But my larger point in making this video has to do with how the anti-feminist movement, although it is grounded in although it is grounded somewhat in reality, it's given, I think it's gone too far. I think we've already gotten to the point where it's gone too far, because the anti-feminist movement has created a home for legitimate sexists and legitimate misogynists to have a place where they can thrive and where they can spread their, quite frankly, inappropriate and hateful content. And I'm not saying to censor them. That's not what this video is about. This video is just to call attention to the fact that there are now people that are embraced by members of the right that have actual sexist beliefs. So I'm talking specifically about people like Stephen Molyneux. Stephen Molyneux, if you check him out on Twitter, he repeatedly and routinely talks about how women need to get married before they're, like, I don't know what the number is, 27 or something like that. Women basically need to get married young, like in the olden days, in 18, 19, 20, they need to be getting married and they need to be having kids as fast as they can. And he discusses things like how women's eggs are less healthy post turning 28 or something like that. I'm throwing those numbers out there. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but that's essentially what the message is. You better get married and have kids before you're 30, or you're basically a goner, is his message. And I mean, if somebody was coming to me in a more scientific manner and saying, you know what, here's the statistics, here's the life, that's fine. It's not the statistics that bother me. And I know there's some people on Twitter, they're like, he's just, talking about statistics, he's just talking about a study, that's not what he's doing. That's not what he's doing. He's hiding behind that. He's hiding behind alleged statistics, which I question. First of all, I don't know what, I question a lot of the statistics that are thrown around on this issue, because people throw them out. People like to throw numbers out, call them statistics, and then I'm supposed to kowtow to it because they're statistics. They never, or I shouldn't say never, but they often don't actually cite the studies, and never have I had somebody come up to me and say, here's how the study was conducted, here's why the samples are valid, here's why. Nobody, especially on Twitter, would ever dream of doing something like that. So I take a lot of issue with a lot of the statistics that are thrown out there. But here's my thing with Stephen Molyneux. This idea that somehow it's appropriate to post on Twitter and to write to various women talking about how their eggs are becoming more unhealthy and how they're dying off more quickly, and how you're more likely to have a disabled child if you have a child post turning 30 and things like that. And this fear-mongering. This is not appropriate. If a guy said any of those things to me in real life, in a real life setting, and was just like started a conversation, and then we started talking about this and this, and your eggs are dying, Kelly, what do you think about that? I'd say go take a hike. This is not any of your business. It's not any of your business for a I don't know, mid-30s, early 40-year-old man to be talking about this to young girls on Twitter. I'm not alleging anything else other than it's not appropriate, and I don't think that somebody like that should be embraced by anybody on the right. There's other names I could bring up, but that's the one that you guys will see me dragging on Twitter, essentially, because I just find it wildly inappropriate for people to be discussing those kinds of things in a non-personal setting. If let's say Stephen Molyneux was a father who was talking to his daughter and explaining the science of how things works in that area, that's one thing. Or somebody else, in any other scenario, if it's a parent or if it's somebody close to another person who's struggling in those areas, that's one thing entirely. It's another thing to be posting about this on Twitter, posting about women's reproductive parts and so on and so forth. It's just, and talking about how if you don't get married before you're 30, then you're not going to find anyone, because that means you're going to be unattractive. Men only want to marry young women because they're more attractive. Just stuff like that. Stephen Molyneux, would you say this to your daughter? Like, would you tell your 35-year-old daughter, let's pretend for a minute, you have a 35-year-old daughter, would you tell her, oh, you know what, your chances, doesn't matter. It's too late for you. You just screwed. You're a loser. It's just not appropriate. And I guess I don't see anybody else talking about this. I see Stephen Molyneux being brought on various shows that I used to watch, and people talking about how, he basically giving him legitimacy that he shouldn't have. And I'm taking all of this out on Stephen Molyneux. As I said, there's other people that I take issue with on their thoughts on this issue, and I just think it's just because the modern feminist movement has taken some bad turns and is basically out of control in a lot of the things that they're talking about, doesn't mean the actual principles of original feminism and the idea that women should be treated with some amount of respect, that doesn't invalidate those things. And it doesn't mean that women shouldn't be in the workplace, and it doesn't mean that women shouldn't make their own decisions. Women are going to make their own decisions, and I know that upsets Stephen Molyneux, but some women are not going to get married before they're 30. And that's not the end of the world. It's not. It's also not the end of the world if some women decide not to have kids. It's their decision. It's not Stephen Molyneux's. It's not anybody else's decision. You're not in charge of their life. You're not in charge of any of these women's lives. And unless they're going out and murdering their own children, or they're running around topless, they can make their own decisions. They can live their lives the way they want. And there are consequences to, waiting to do certain things, but again, it's not the end of the world if you don't have kids until you're 35, because you can adopt. There's other things you can do besides, have kids the old-fashioned way. And that upsets people when I say that. Oh, but you didn't make a child that looked like you. Do I give a crap? I know that's like a thing for some people. Oh, but the kid needs to look like me. Does it? Are you going to treat the kid any different if it doesn't look like you? What if your partner was of another race? What if you married a black guy? He's probably not going to look quite like you. Are you going to treat your kid any different because of that? And then you start treading into then the alt-right comes in and says, well, that's why we shouldn't have interracial marriage. And then we get all into these, it's kind of a snowball effect for me. Anyway, so my point of this video is, let's cool it on the anti-feminism rhetoric, because feminism in and of itself is not a bad thing. The modern feminist movement that embraces abortion and embraces lewd behavior and embraces all these other, inappropriate things, transgender story time at the library and all the rest of it, that's all, it's fine to be anti-bad behavior. It's fine to be anti-lewd behavior. It's fine to be anti-abortion, but it's not fine to then say that the entire feminist movement and the idea that women should be treated poorly should be talked about in this kind of disgraceful, I don't know, bottom feeding manner about how they need to, have kids before you're 30 or there's going to be a problem. You're probably going to have a disabled child. Again, why is that a problem? Why is that a problem, guy? Does because you had a disabled child mean that somehow you're now a failure of a parent because you waited a few years? Or I'm sorry, it doesn't make any sense to me why somebody like Stephen Molyneux is embraced by certain members of the right and people who are like-minded people with him, who think that that a woman's purpose is only to have children, and that should be the 100% first priority, and she needs to drop everything, find the first guy on the street, and make a child with him. That kind of thinking is not the way the world works. It's not really the way the world worked even back before, when women didn't have the option to work. You don't have to just find the first guy on the street. Especially nowadays. You just don't. And it doesn't have to be a priority for you. You have the right to make your own decisions. And I don't know why that bothers some people. So that's basically my little talk today. It's a little bit shorter than usual because I'm just solo today. I don't have any guests this weekend. So if there are any questions, please post them in the comments. Please post how much you hate me in the comments too. I really enjoy reading all of that. If you have any thoughts on people like Stephen Molyneux, I would love to hear them, because I don't often... I hear from very few people about the appropriate treatment of women. I hear a lot about, well, you should just give this guy a pass. He's speaking truth to power. He says a lot of other good things, so it's okay that he says this bad thing over here. I find that excuse a lot more popular. I find that excuse a lot, actually, with a lot of... Well, so, like, Milo Yiannopoulos got this a lot. Well, he's got a lot of good things to say over here on this, and this issue. So the fact that he hates Jews or that he's posting anti-Semitic content, that's okay. That's okay now. The people do the same thing with Molyneux. They do the same thing with a lot of other people. Well, they have this one kind of weird thing. Hey, if they have this one shady, weird thing, they've got a bunch of others, and they probably have some skeletons in their closet. So just because you like what a person says on X, Y, and Z issue, that doesn't mean that you should throw all your eggs in that basket and promote this guy or whoever it happens to be and make them somebody that you will, die on that hill on Twitter for. It does, you can't come to me at the end of the day and tell me that Stephen Molyneux or like-minded people are people that should be taken seriously when they post this kind of inappropriate content regarding women on Twitter. There's just a level of decorum that we've lost with not just with social media, but with the rise of social media and with the rise of the anti-feminist movement. There's a certain level of decorum that I think has been lost with how women are treated and how, or what is considered appropriate to discuss in a public forum. And I just think that people need to be more mindful of that. It's not acceptable to talk about women's reproductive parts on Twitter, period. It's just not. So don't do it.